My name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. I got divorced 6 years ago and remarried 3 years back. Me, my first hubby Dan, and my current hubby, Lewis, we all worked together at Smith Foods. Dan and Lewis were like oil and water, always competing, but they both really gave their all for the company. After me and Dan decided to tie the knot, I quit my job. The next year, our little girl Julie came into our world. Our marriage was like a fairy tale, at least for the first 5 years. Then things started to go south. Dan fell head over heels for a gal 10 years his junior, named Natalie. He hardly ever came home, and it tore me up. Eventually, I decided to divorce him. I've been a single mom to Julie ever since. While Dan was off with his new flame, Lewis, bless his heart, reached out to me worried. We started talking, not just about Dan, and before we knew it, we ended up tying the knot. Lewis never let on that he was the big boss's son at the office. I didn't have a clue until after we got married. Turns out, my second marriage was like hitting the jackpot. Julie and I have been living the high life. Not long ago, we went skiing in Switzerland. Poor Julie had an accident and now she's in a wheelchair. While I was dropping her off at school, I saw someone at the gate. It was Dan. My ex, who left me for another woman 6 years ago. Thought remarriage was a miracle for you. But look at you now, back to a life of misery. It's almost funny. Then Lewis rolls up in his fancy car, and Dan's face just goes white as a sheet.
What? Lewis? Driving such a fancy car?
Lewis is the son of the president of Smith Foods. He's about to become the youngest president in the company's history. Talk about a plot twist, huh? I wanted to share the life journey that led me to this point of happiness.
The company's huge, isn't it? Didn't seem this big when we first interviewed?
It's a long-standing food company. It's still growing and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Dan, Lewis, and I joined Smith Foods and were assigned to the PR department. On our first day, Dan wouldn't stop talking, and we planned to grab some drinks to get to know each other better.
Man, your French is incredible.
My dad's background is French. I was born and raised right here in the US.
Rachel, I heard you're also fluent in French. Did you grow up abroad?
I've always been fond of French. I studied it more in the Global Studies program at college.
Wow, I can't speak a lick of it, but somehow I still got hired. Guess I'm lucky.
Being in the same starting group, me, Dan, and Lewis would often go out for drinks. We got pretty close. But Dan, getting greedier by the day, started to see Lewis as his rival. Doesn't it seem like Lewis is the boss's pet? He's even on the cover of our PR magazine. Sure, he's good-looking with a tall stature. I can give him that. But a regular employee, acting like a model? And he's always in the spotlight at work, like he's the face of the company. If they gave me a chance, I could outdo him. I don't want to lose to him, not in work, not in anything. I don't think Lewis cares about winning or losing. He's just doing what's asked of him. He even said he's tired of being judged by his looks alone. Do you and Lewis ever go out for drinks, just the two of you? Well, if he invites me. Around this time, it seems Dan started to have feelings for me. I had a sense of it, but pretended not to notice as there were no clear words or actions from him. The three of us, Dan, Lewis, and I, grew closer both at work and in our private lives, inspiring and challenging each other. 2 years after joining Smith Foods, Dan asked me out.
What should I do? How should I respond?
Maybe I was being the villain here, but I talked to Lewis about Dan. If you don't dislike him, why not go out with him? I respect Dan and think he's a good guy. He could make you happy. Dan was a man of intense but transient passions. His tendency to get completely absorbed in something was somewhat frightening. But I gave an honest okay to Dan, who had expressed his feelings directly. Dan and I got married when we were 25. I left my job to focus on family life. It's a shame you're leaving. You had the potential to be a career woman. You're always attentive to details others miss, finishing tasks before they're even requested. It's really a waste.
Thank you. You're the only one who appreciates me that way. Contact me anytime if you need anything. Though, I think Dan will take good care of you. If he ever cheats, I'll be right there to give him a piece of my mind.
Lewis said lightly, a statement I would come to remember.
Dan, if you're going to be late, at least let me know. Dinner's going to waste.
Stop nagging.
It's because of your constant complaining that I don't want to come home. Don't forget, Julie has her school play tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
I've got plans, but I can't make them. What? I told you to keep your schedule free ages ago. Julie's looking forward to you being there.
6 years into our marriage. Our daughter Julie is now 5. The once doting father, Dan, had changed completely. I wondered what caused it. Was it because he knew I was aware of his affair? Dan was boldly enjoying his time with his mistress. This mistress was a piece of work, shamelessly bragging and belittling me, his wife.
Oh, tomorrow's your mistress's birthday, right? You withdrew savings for a brand accessory gift, didn't you? I saw her bragging about it on social media. Her family's wealthy, right? Her dad's a company president? So why are you spoiling her? Are you being played? It's creepy how you snoop around.
I got this information from a junior at Smith Foods, Bob, who had taken a liking to me and admired me. Dan was apparently proud of having a mistress. He blabbered and boasted about things I didn't even ask. I heard you met her at her cafe at the station. She was so cute that you gave her your number, hoping for a chance. And she contacted you first, right? That woman, either she's not used to attention or she's overly confident. And she's just in her 20s, right? I doubt she's serious about you. I'm not a lost cause yet. Dan declared defiantly, choosing to be open rather than hide.
So, you frequented her cafe every day, and it paid off. Don't you realize you get too obsessed with one thing and lose sight of everything else? I've always been devoted. Did you know your mistress has been harassing me? It's pretty serious slander. If I take this to a lawyer, it could be a legal case. She's posting on my social media, calling me horrible names, accusing me of not doing housework, of cheating. She's spreading lies. The other moms at Julie's kindergarten have seen it, and now they treat me like a pariah. If this continues, I'm going to take action. Reacting to such trivial stuff and getting all worked up? Are you a child? Stop making a fuss, it's tiring. I'm going to take a shower and sleep.
But the situation worsened.
Rachel?
It's me, Lewis. Out of the blue, I received a call from Lewis. It had been a while since I heard his voice, as I had left my job for family life. And Dan rarely spoke about work, let alone about Lewis.
Lewis! It's been a while. How are you? Actually, Dan has been absent without notice for the past few days. I was wondering if he's sick or something.
Dan hadn't been coming home for the last few days, and now he wasn't even showing up at work. But I couldn't bring myself to tell Lewis about this embarrassing situation.
Well, yeah, maybe he's not feeling well. Sorry about that. I'll make sure he contacts the office. Are you okay?
Lewis asked, his concern almost bringing me to tears. I wanted to confide everything in him. To have someone sympathize and comfort me.
If it's going to be a long absence, I really need him to let us know. Right now, Dan, me, and 3 others are handling a big project. He is the group leader. Honestly, we can't proceed without him. I'm sorry for the trouble he's causing everyone. I guess he'll have to step down from this project then, if it's holding things up. I'll pass the message to Dan,
I said, realizing the severity of the impact on his work. I felt helpless, knowing there was nothing more I could do. I tried calling Dan, though I expected no answer. My emails were being ignored, and the phone calls went unanswered.
Hello?
To my surprise, it wasn't Dan, but his mistress who answered.
Oh, it's his wife. Dan's in the shower, can't come to the phone. Do you have a message for him? Is my husband staying at your place? Yeah, he stays here most of the time, occasionally at a hotel, but mostly at my place. Are you keeping him from going to work? Are you the possessive type? Dan's planning to quit his current job for a new opportunity. What? I haven't heard anything about that. Maybe he can't be honest with you? He says you're scared when you're angry. He told me he's often left wandering the streets at night because you won't let him in. She was spouting all sorts of things, lies Dan had probably told her to make it seem like their marriage was failing. A typical tactic of an unfaithful husband. My father owns a business. Dan's going to take over as president soon. It's a great opportunity he wouldn't want to miss. Men want to be at the top, don't they? That's something you couldn't give him. I can make him a president. That's part of my charm. Her father's business, a cafe, was just a small shop in front of the station. They were planning to expand into a chain. But I wondered if becoming president of such a business was really what Dan wanted. Given his aspirations when we first joined Smith Foods. Why don't you just file for divorce? Dan doesn't come home or go to work, so what's the point of staying married? It's not that simple. We have a daughter, Julie. Are you the one keeping Dan from coming home? What? No way. He approached me first, and I reluctantly responded. I'm with him because he listens to me. I wasn't planning to marry, but my dad was looking for a successor. Dan just happened to be there. He's lucky, isn't he? Getting to marry someone 10 years younger and become a president. Of course, he wouldn't want to go back to you. I could almost see her smug face. I had checked her social media. She was the typical influencer type, flaunting her lavish lifestyle with branded goods. She's deliberately posting with the prices included. It seems like she's being supported by young women who aspire to be like Natalie. Sorry to bother you again. Today, Dan's agent contacted me. He wants to resign. Probably hired one of those famous resignation services. It's kind of unmanly for him, isn't it? So, he's officially resigned, but what are you planning to do with him? It's likely going to end in divorce. Divorce? It's come to that? The truth is, Dan doesn't plan to come home anymore. He's been at his mistress's place for almost a month, no contact, not coming home. What? It's gotten that bad? That's serious. Divorcing now, when my daughter Julie is just about to start school, would hurt her, wouldn't it? I tried to envision us getting back together, but it's impossible now. Dan has completely moved on to his mistress. Dan has always been the type to forge ahead once he makes up his mind, not listening to others. That's why I think he left everything behind to be with her, kind of like eloping. If there's anything I can do, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. Since then, I often found myself turning to Lewis for advice. Even on the day I signed the divorce papers, I instinctively called him. I'm disappointed in Dan. He always said he would never cheat. Aren't you about the age to start thinking about marriage? Don't you have someone special? No, not really. I think I'm okay with getting married around 40. I don't have any particular desire or ideal vision of marriage. He was as handsome in character as he was in looks. Popular but never boastful or arrogant. I was genuinely curious about what kind of woman Lewis would eventually marry. Even after my divorce from Dan was finalized, I kept getting updates from my junior, Bob. He loved gossip and was known as Smith Foods' very own entertainment reporter. I'm so tired. What's for dinner tonight? Order delivery. I'm tired too. I heard that Dan, now married to his mistress Natalie, was struggling. He had been handed the reins of the cafe, her father's business, and was already facing difficulties. Dan had initially been enthusiastic about turning the business around. But he couldn't fully commit to the job, finding it uninteresting. Tired? That's because you've been out and about, not doing housework. You wanted to do it perfectly and even stopped working at the shop, but in the end, you didn't do anything. I'm only 22, you know? My friends are still single. I'm not going to be tied down at home.
Their marriage was clearly not going well. 3 years after my divorce from Dan and his marriage to Natalie, they were still together, albeit unhappily.
Wow, here?
Julie was understandably surprised. I was even more so. Julie and I were standing in front of Lewis's family mansion, having been invited over. The house was enormous.
Hey, welcome.
Lewis greeted us warmly, his charm just as evident in private. Meeting Lewis's parents and having a pleasant conversation with them, it suddenly dawned on me.
Your father is from Smith Foods, right? You didn't use the Smith surname. Was it to avoid being known as the president's son?
I couldn't just become the president overnight. I wanted to start from the ground up, to understand what our employees go through. My dad still says I have a lot to learn. I'm really sorry for keeping it a secret until now. No way, this is like hitting the jackpot. Lewis had recently proposed to me, and today I was meeting his parents to officially announce our engagement.
I feel so honored that you would marry someone like me, a divorced woman with a daughter.
Why are you being so formal? Just be your usual self, Rachel. Lewis lightened the mood, and we spent the day with smiles. Lewis had always been there to listen and advise me during the rough patch with Dan. Our growing closeness seemed inevitable. My biggest concern about remarrying was Julie. Would she need a new dad? Why does Lewis have to leave? Why can't he just stay with us? Julie had asked earlier. It seemed that her memories with Dan were being replaced by those with Lewis, elevating his place in her heart. Then one day, Julie called Lewis Dad and expressed her wish for him to be her father. That's how Lewis and I started preparing for our marriage.
What? Rachel and Lewis getting married?
That was Dan's initial reaction when our junior colleague Bob, a gossip lover, told him about our wedding.
When did this happen?
Rachel doesn't like guys like Lewis. She used to say he's too skinny and unreliable. She needs someone like me who goes to the gym. We're complete opposites. Rachel's taste in men is so inconsistent. She just goes for any guy who says he likes her. She's not even that pretty, and she's got a kid, and she's in her mid-30s. A younger, prettier woman without a kid is obviously better. What is Lewis thinking? With his looks and brains, why a divorced woman with a child? What's his angle? They'll break up soon, maybe in 3 years. Me and Natalie? Dan was evasive when it came to his own affairs. But Bob skillfully managed to draw the conversation out. After all, even though it's a small cafe, people say the prices are high. The coffee taste isn't that bad either. That's why I've kept the prices high, but the customers don't seem to understand. They wonder why good drinks can't be cheap. But the scale is just too different. I used to work for Smith Foods, a big food company, you know? Dealing with a coffee for $5 each, that's just small fry. And about Natalie, are things going well with her? Since the beginning of the marriage, there was an uneasy atmosphere, but it has somehow lasted for 3 years. Things aren't going well with Natalie. She's young, with a wide social circle, and won't listen to me. Her parents just dumped the failing business on me and turned a blind eye. We're like a couple in name only. I tend to get obsessed and then lose interest quickly. Natalie can't leave me now that I've taken over her father's failing business. She should be grateful to me, but we'd barely have a marriage. No housework, no marital life. A housekeeper? Impossible, her family isn't that rich. Just because someone calls themselves a president doesn't mean they're wealthy. I was astounded by how freely he talked to a junior colleague. Hearing such complaints about his wife and work made me even angrier. Dan was clearly upset about my happy life with Lewis. He hadn't accepted the fact that I was remarrying Lewis. Then, 3 years later,
there's something important I need to discuss.
I got a sudden call from Dan. It had been about a year since I last heard from him.
I'd like to see Julie at least once a month. I can't afford a lawyer, so I want to talk to you directly.
His sudden interest in Julie seemed too convenient. He never mentioned wanting to see her in the past 6 years. Probably some trouble with Natalie made him think of Julie. I later found out that at this time, Dan was under a lot of pressure both at work and at home. I'll have to ask Julie.
She barely remembers you as her dad since you separated before she started elementary school.
She's close to Louis now. If she says no, you'll have to accept that.
What does Julie say about me?
Why would she talk about you? You think too highly of yourself. When I asked Julie, she didn't want to see Dan. I told him her honest answer.
Is that really what Julie said? Or are you making her say that? Or maybe you're lying to me.
What can I do to make you believe me? After I said that, Dan was left speechless. For a while, there was no contact from him, so I thought he had given up on meeting Julie. Yet, today, he was lurking at the gate of Julie's elementary school. Julie was in a wheelchair, and Dan mistakenly assumed she was disabled. She had injured herself skiing on our recent trip to Switzerland and was using the wheelchair just until she recovered. But Dan made a very rude comment about it.
What's all this commotion?
Louis arrived in a luxury car to drop off Julie.
Why such a fancy car? Louis, really?
Louis is the son of the president of Smith Foods. He's set to take over as president soon.
What? Louis is the president's son? He never hinted at that. Why did he keep it a secret from us? Was it because he thought we would act differently around the president's son? That's just arrogance. Even changing his name. He should have worked at another company if he wanted to start from the bottom. If he doesn't have the guts for that, he shouldn't be president. Louis is too soft.
Dan ranted, seizing the opportunity to complain about Louis. Even when we were married, he always bad-mouthed Louis. What are you doing here? If you don't have business, please leave. I can call the police for suspicious behavior. You're just showing off because Rachel's here. You don't look good at all. I'll excuse myself then. I came to see Julie. She's my child, I have the right to see her. I already told you, Julie doesn't want to meet you. Whether that's true or not.
And I don't want her to meet you either. You chose your mistress over a still young Julie. I think you're unclean for that reason. You barely attended Julie's kindergarten events. Do you have any idea how lonely she felt? Do you know what she said the first time she wore her school backpack? She wondered if you would be happy to see her. After that day, she stopped talking about you completely.
I said, holding back tears.
I not only worked a day job, but I also worked as a web writer from home to ensure an income. I was so busy with housework that I hardly had time to talk with Julie. I made her feel lonely too.
So that's why you married wealthy Louis.
I didn't even know Louis's father was the president until we decided to get married. I was drawn to Louis's kindness and warmth. Even if he weren't the president's son, I would have married him.
You and Louis have been together since you joined the company as new employees, weren't you? This kind of thinking is pointless. He's just trying to find a loophole to gain an advantage because he's at a disadvantage.
Now that I think about it, there are a lot of things that make sense. She just happened to start dating and then marry me when she was having a little fight with Louis.
Maybe that's the real story, huh?
That's a far-fetched story. We have nothing to be ashamed of in our relationship.
Just a man chaser, huh? You always pick men from the same circle. Married 2 guys from the same PR department you joined. You should broaden your horizons.
And what about your marriage? Married a girl 10 years younger, abandoning Julie. She's probably tired of you by now. That's typical for you, isn't it? Happy just to win someone over, but then you lose interest. The classic once you've caught the fish, you don't feed it mindset.
This conversation is a waste of time. I'm leaving. Running away, huh? Figures, you can't have an equal conversation with me. I'm not interested in small fry.
I heard your rice ball shop is in trouble. Good luck with your presidency. I have bigger business goals in mind than a $5 coffee.
In the end, Louis had the last word. I got emotional too. Dan's greatest punishment for abandoning everything for his mistress was that he would never see his own daughter again. And as Louis said, Dan's cafe went bankrupt. Dan, now the president, was saddled with debt. He had been tricked into taking over Natalie's father's failing business. Dan was deceived because of his own ulterior motives. Natalie, having found a new boyfriend, left him and filed for divorce. Then came a happy event for me. I was pregnant with Louis's child. Though it was a late pregnancy, both Louis and I were overjoyed. His parents were happy about that. And Julie was thrilled, which comforted me. I don't regret marrying Dan. After all, he gave me Julie, the greatest treasure.